Hey everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Jurassic World Evolution Cinematics. Just wanted to let you know that you can hop on over to my dinosaur-focused channel Dino Tales, where you can already watch the next episode of this series ahead. So be sure to go and check out Dino Tales once you are done with this episode, as you can already watch the next one immediately. Link to the channel will be in the description down below, and please also subscribe to the Dino Tales channel, as it will focus a lot more dinosaur and other animal content there. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the episode. The prehistoric park just has set in its final stage of the Ancient Mammals campaign, where in a fairly short time span, 3 new mammal species were introduced. There were a few other mammals that research had found to recreate as well, but those will be saved for a later time. The final addition to the park was the Leptobos, and the news of these new creatures gained some traction amongst visitors and the press. Many researchers and analysts believe these animals to have the least amount of popularity, since in a way, they just look like your typical bull, but bigger. Yet maybe it was because it was such a familiar sighting, with the biggest difference, the huge size comparison, what made it stand out. It was true that most of the visitors had never heard of the Leptobos, and the earlier added mammals were a bit more famous. But there was just something very special about seeing a creature you are familiar with, but drastically bigger or smaller. An elephant the size of a mouse, or a parrot the size of a Pachyrhinosaurus, would create exactly that same amazement. That's why it was a pleasant surprise to find out how the audience reacted to the Leptobos, and they made sure to put them in a pen that catered to all their needs. There was enough room to roam around in. Despite them originating from Europe and Asia, the caged-off area would be a bit more similar to Africa to create that wildebeest feeling. Seeing the Leptobos gather around a drinking spot evoked the same feeling from nature documentaries, where all the wildebeests are drinking at the creek or river. Only this time, there was not a big scary crocodile in the water that would drag one of the beasts to his death. And so it was time for the next creature to be introduced in the park, and with the success of the carnivore campaign and the mammal campaign, it was only natural that the next campaign would be a herbivore one. This plan had already been in the making several months before, but got delayed by the interception with the mammals. But there were a lot of different opinions on what kind of herbivores to introduce. Since not too long ago, a Styracosaurus was brought into the park as well, the decision was made not to focus on something similar to a Stegosaurus, but instead to have the campaign revolve around dinosaurs similar to that of a Triceratops. Despite the Triceratops being the most famous, this campaign would showcase how many of them came in different shapes and sizes of the same family. The first of the 3 herbivores would be the Pachyrhinosaurus. This magnificent creature was signified by a flattened nose top, which was still rock solid and could be used in duels that were less lethal than that of a tri-horned Triceratops. The Pachyrhinosaurus did still have some horns attached to its skull between the eyes, which did not have that much of a defensive capability. The horn was simply too small to properly gorge an incoming predator, and the horns across its crown were in no position to be useful. These were mostly on display to impress a potential mate. They came in quite a few interesting colors, but did not possess a pattern as exotic or fruitful as other dinosaurs, meaning its horns were the decisive factor rather than its vibrant colors, as is common with birds or other dinosaurs. They were smaller than a Triceratops and made a cuter and more peaceful impression without the horns, though others thought that the bulking flattened nose looked a bit weird, as if the horns were missing. The start of this campaign was a big success, because immediately dinosaur fanatics and members of the press started to speculate what other similar looking species will be added to the park next. Because the defensive capabilities of the Pachyrhinosaurus were not as sturdy as that of a Triceratops, they were, as expected, a bit more of a scaredy cat. The initial moving to the living area did not go as smoothly, as they were very scared and panicked at first. This happened with other creatures too, like the woolly rhino, but by now, the park rangers had come up with something. They would put in some calming medicines in the food, which did indeed seem to work and put the animal at ease far quicker. And thus the park had welcomed a beautiful new family to its collection. And then it was time for the next dinosaur, and this was the Styracosaurus. Now, unlike the Pachyrhinosaurus, the one thing that does immediately stand out with these dinosaurs are their impressive horns and even more impressive color pattern. Now, this was once again some manipulation that was caused by the scientists, as they believed the regular Styracosaurus they were able to recreate was not interesting enough when it came to its size and color. So they juiced it up a bit, and this was the result. They were as brightly colored as tropical birds, and their horns were made even longer to make it seem like they were wearing a giant crown or a peacock spreading its wings behind them. It was a very elegant display, and also a bit menacing in a way. These creatures blew everyone's mind who laid eyes upon them, and many could not believe what the scientists were able to pull off. Now, despite their colors being very vibrant and bright, it was not like there was a huge difference in colors themselves when comparing the different members of the small herd. With the exception of one, which had shades of purple and black, the others were almost like a more washed out version of the original bright red and green one. Yet that did not dampen how impressive they were, and it was in a way interesting to see dinosaurs with such an exotic pattern and coloring scheme that initially did not serve any purpose, because the Cerakosaurus did not work that way, where they impressed others with their physical display. In a sense, the Styracosaurus were amongst some of the most peaceful dinosaurs in the park. Yes, their nose horns were definitely more deadly than that of a similar species, but the lacking of the two giant horns above the eyes like a Triceratops made it to where the angle at which they could fight off a predator was not as efficient nor accurate. But the Styracosaurus loved their new living space and quickly adjusted to it, and were enjoying the sun, the fresh water, and of course the delicious leaves. And then it was time for the final herbivore in terms of the campaign to be introduced. Chances were very likely that after this, another carnivore would make its entry to the park, because even with the mammals, it had been a while since the park actually got a new predator. Many people were itching to see those teeth and claws again. But for now, the campaign came to its end with the coming of the Sinoceratops, a giant, magnificent beast. The Sinoceratops was incredible to behold, its crown majestic and curved, with horns that followed the shape of its curving bone structure. Beautiful patterns along the crown and a large horn on its nose make it in some ways resemble a modern rhino all the more closer. A common thing with all these types were that they lived in herds. Now, herds in the wild were much bigger, but since there wasn't any danger lurking in the park, many of these felt at ease with a much smaller group of dinosaurs, and the Sinoceratops were once again a very peaceful animal.